Mordecai Holtz replacing for just a few more weeks Charles Sakal. And we are anyone who wants to put in their tefillot for refuah or any good things that they need, or any extra tefillot that they need. The Zera Shimshon promises that anyone who learns his Torah, that not only will they see their children sit around the table learning Torah with them, but everything, all good and all good and benevolence will be passed down, and hopefully Bezrat Hashem, the tefillot, the bracha of the Zera Shimshon should reside upon all of us and all those people who need their tefillot and yeshuot. Anyone who wants to send in their tefillot, yeshuot, requests with names and anything else, they can send us to at the Zera Shimshon across all social media channels.
Exactly.
And we'll be happy to add them to our tefillot and to the
Rabbi's tefillah, Rabbi Yisrael Silverberg, and also we bring the names to the Einuka and to other Rabbonim as well.
Yes. So, okay. So we're now in last part one, we did Parshat.
If nothing works, we're still learning Torah.
Exactly.
That's true.
That's right. Exactly. If nothing else, the Torah is really the best protection.
Best segula.
Best segula. So, anyways, in last week's in part one, we did a piece of Torah from Parshat Matot, and now we're going to do a piece of Torah from Parshat Massei. And this week's Parsha, which is almost always read together, to finish the Sefer Bamidbar before Dvarim, which is always read the Shabbat before Tisha B'Av. So, Parshat Dvarim is always read before Tisha B'Av. Dvarim is always read before, and Vayet Chanan is always read the first Parsha after. So, Matot Massei is almost always read together, so that we kind of fit it into the equation. Either which way, Parshat Massei is filled with the most famous part of Parshat Massei is the 42 travelings, the 42 pieces.
42 Massei?
We're going to be doing Torah Aleph.
Massei Aleph.
Massei Aleph. So the question, the Massei is all about the journeys of which Bnei Israel took throughout the desert, and there are many Mefarshim on so many different components of this parsha. Why 42? Everyone's personal journey. This is just an example of so many of our own journeys that we have to take. So the Zera Shimshon has a very unique explanation, not about individuals, but really about one of the pieces of the Zera Shimshon in general. Just a little bit of background. The Zera Shimshon in general likes to understand how two parts of the psukim are related. We learned that in the last one, also with last week, the last Torah that we just went through from Matot. He also asked a similar question. He's trying to understand what's the connection, because there are two parts of the pasuk usually can be broken down. Almost any pasuk can be broken down to two, and he's trying to understand how part one and part two are related, especially when it's not just and God spoke to Moshe and to say, right, but rather there's something in there. And if we look at the pasuk that he's going through to look at, the pasuk is Perek Lamed Gimel pasuk Daled, and it says, Umitzrayim mikabrim et asher hika Hashem behem kol bechor, and that's the pasuk kind of stops, and then it says Uvelohem asem asa Hashem shvatim. So it says in English, it says, and the Egyptians were burying those among them who Hashem had struck, that is every firstborn, and their gods Hashem had inflicted punishments. So the two parts of the psukim, the two parts of the pasuk don't seem to be connected. One is based the Mitzrayim were dealing with their firstborns who were just killed, and then the second part is that Hashem took care or hit or did something to their gods. But there's no, it's like there's like a few words missing in between those two parts of the pasuk, and Zera Shimshon is going to ask what's going on here. So it says, "Umitzrayim mikavrim b'lehem asash Hashem shvatim." Kasheh, dema inyan umitzrayim mikavrim im uvelohem asash Hashem shvatim. So the question, he's asked a simple question: what is the connection between the fact that Mitzrayim were burying their firstborn children with the fact that their gods were, Hashem did some sort of miracles with these gods? No real connection in the pasuk, and we're trying to figure out what it is. The Katav HaBechai, Rabbeinu Bechai in Parshat Bo says, "Shebalayla lo hirgishu b'makat Elohem lefi shayat trudim b'makat bechorot, aval baboker shalchu lebeit toavotam hikiru hirgishu." The Rabbeinu Chaim says in Parshat Bo, when the story of Makat Bechorot is told to us, Rabbeinu Chaim says is that at night they didn't feel they didn't really see what Hashem did to the gods, because at night what were they so busy with? They were busy with dealing with their children that were just unfortunately killed.
What's the difficulty?
The difficulty is there's a disconnect between the two parts of the pasuk.
Yeah.
The part one is
He's inflicting
pain
on
upon
the
the children, and the Egyptians
While the thing says, the next one says,
they were afflicted on their gods.
Yeah.
Right. So now he has to explain what he has. His underlying question is, what's the connection? So now he has to say, if I have to understand what the connection is, because it doesn't make sense that the pasuk would just be two pieces of two separate things. So he says, is that the Rabbeinu Bechai in Parshat Bo says that at night the Mitzrayim didn't really understand and didn't grasp how great the Makkah, the plague was, because they were so busy with Makat Bechorot, they were so busy with the fact that their children were killed, that they didn't even see the fact that Hashem also punished their God. Only in the next day, when next morning, when they went to their house of worship, then they say, "Oh, now we get it. Now we get what just happened." And in the time of Plishtim, Dagon. Do you learn about Dagon? Not Dagon, Dagon.
oh,
It's in the Avodah Torah, yeah?
Yeah.
this is why pronunciation.
Some kind of fish thing.
Right. So Dagon was a famous in the time of Yehoshua. In the time of Shmuel, the Aron Abrit was stolen, and by Dagon, and they placed the Aron into the house of worship. And when they brought it into the house of worship, this idol fell. They put it back up. It fell again. They put it back up. It fell, a couple of times it goes back and forth, and they didn't make the connection that the fact that the Aron was in this house of worship was what was causing the idol to fall. They didn't get the message. If we look at the actual Makat Bechorot, it never mentions the fact that their God was Hashem punished their God, because they were so busy. Yeah, it never mentions it. Mm-hmm. So he's saying they were so busy with their Bechorot, with their children that were just killed, that they didn't even think about their God.
Spiritual level of life.
Yeah.
And when trouble hits us,
right,
we immediately think of Hashem.
Right.
Baruch Dayan. Not that we should ever experience it.
We're supposed to do it.
Right.
We're supposed to do that.
We're supposed to do that.
Right.
And they couldn't even think about it.
Right. So that's what that whole part was quoting Rabbeinu Bechai. But now, if you look at the pasuk beforehand, the pasuk right before this pasuk, which we just mentioned, which is the one that he has questions with, it says here, "Vayisu miRamses b'chodesh harishon b'chamishas yom l'chodesh harishon mimachar haPesach yitzu bnei Yisrael b'yad Ramah l'nei kol Mitzrayim." So Bnei Yisrael leave Ramses on the first day of which is Pesach. That means the day after Pesach. Yitzu bnei Yisrael b'yad Ramah. They with all their glory, and they did it in front, in the eyes, in the faces of Egypt. So he says, the Zera Shimshon says, he says, it would have made sense that Bnei Israel would leave Mitzrayim so that way in the middle of the day. Why? So that way everyone could see, the whole world would see it. But he says, no. Right? Had Hashem waited till the morning, then so for everyone to see, that would have made sense. To do it at night, he could have done it only if he was just trying to prove the Egyptians wrong. Then he could have done it at night too, right? Right? What happened at night when the Makat Bechorot was taking place? They were all busy with their children, so they would have just been like, "All right, just get out of here, just get out. We don't care about you. You're not important right now. We have to deal with our own children." Lamtin baboker hayalo lachush pei yachazek libam ho'il she'avra makah v'yirtzu od lishlach et Yisrael k'mo she'asu b'chol shar makot. In fact, maybe more, if you think about it, why did Hashem wait till the next day? He shouldn't be waiting for the next day. Why should he not wait for the next day? Because maybe the next day they would have had time to process what just happened.
Maybe we just the previous 9 Makot should just go at night.
Right.
And then wait till the morning.
But so that's the thing. So he's saying, why did we wait? We shouldn't have waited. If we wait, what's going to happen is they're going to regret, just like they did the other 9 Makot. Every one of them, they regretted. They said, yeah, go out, and then said, wait a minute, don't forget, I'm taking back my
I'm over
statement.
it.
Yeah, I'm over it. Go stay. So why did Hashem say go? It says here, Yom lachodesh harishon mimachar Pesach yitzu b'nei Yisrael biyad Ramah le'inei kol Mitzrayim. So he's asking, why does it have to say le'inei kol Mitzrayim? He could have done it at night when Mitzrayim were all dealing with their own problems, and then they would have been like, all right, just get out of here. We don't care about you right now. We got to deal with our own problems. But they did it in front of everyone. So he's saying, he has a question. Lachein ba katuv b'tiretz. שלא היה מקום לחשש זה, שהרי בבוקר כשיצאו ישראל היה להם לקבור מתיהם לתועבות שלהם, ואז היו רגישים במכת אלוהיהם. When did they really feel the destruction? They don't feel the destruction at night. They didn't feel the destruction at night. They felt the destruction, and the real destruction of what Hashem did was during the day. Only the next day. At night, it was just that they saw that their children, unfortunately, were killed. But they didn't process how much Hashem really had, what Hashem really did, until the next morning when they had to go to their house of worship and they see what Hashem did to their idols. So Hashem said, no, there was nothing to worry about because they really didn't. It says here, right? So he says, this is the reason why the 2 psukim are connected. The 2 psukim, the pasuk in the case of in Parshat Massei, it's pasuk Gimel and Daled. Why these 2 psukim are connected? Why are they 2 connected? How are they 2 connected? The 2 connected is because Hashem wanted specifically for the Mitzrayim to see during the day that Bnei Yisrael are leaving. So even when they're the most upset, which is when they see that their gods were destroyed, they see how much Hashem has power. Right? In other words, at night, it could have been easily done that Hashem said, get out at night. Leave right now. Go out at night. And the Mitzrayim would have probably been like, sure, get out of here. I don't care. Because they were so busy, whatever. But Hashem wanted to show them, Hashem wanted to make a point to the Mitzrayim that specifically now, during the day, when you're all upset because of what I just did to your gods and to your idols and whatever, I want to show you and really show you who's boss.
Maybe he's showing it to Israel.
I ain't showing it to Israel too. Yeah, as well.
So Israel, you going when they see you.
Right.
Don't run at night.
Right. It's actually, you're right. It's both. It's both parts. One is to show Mitzrayim, and one is to show Bnei Israel, saying is, look who's boss. I'm taking you out when they should be the most upset, and they're not going to do anything. Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh, okay. Now it says here, V'ati Shaper. Now we can understand why it says Biyad Ramah. Biyad Ramah is like with what did you say here? Biyad Ramah, he explains it he says here, the children went forth with an upraised hand. That doesn't really say anything. An upraised hand means they went strongly and proudly. Here it says Biyad Ramah. In every other place we talked about Biyad Chazakah with a strong hand. Here it's like a powerful, exorbitant hand, like in sense of pride as opposed to a strength. He's saying is that Ram means also powerful and lofty. Every other place it says Hashem used a strong hand, a heavy hand. Here it says Hashem used a lofty hand, meaning he wanted to prove to them that he is the lofty of the lofty, meaning he is the highest power, and therefore because he is the highest power, Hashem wanted to prove to them that this is really that he is that power. And if we look, the only other time that really the word Yad Ramah is used is in right before Az Yashir. It says Kativ Yad Ramah Mishum Dahatam Nami Mayri Sheikh Zru Lifnei Baal Tzafon Shenishar Mikol Elohim Yisrael Kedei Latutam. Now this is something I never thought about, honestly. When we look at the psukim of Parshat Bashalach, the beginning of Parshat Bashalach, it says Nichachot Lifnei Baal Tzafon Nichachot Ta'achanu Al Yam. It says you should stand in front. You should stand. Hashem made them go around, like circle back, basically, to Mitzrayim, circle back, and stand in front of Baal Tzafon. So now, up until about a week ago, I thought Baal Tzifon was just like a name of a place.
The what kind of place?
It was just a name of a place.
Oh, name.
Name of a place. According to Zera Shimshon, I'm sure he's quoting it from somewhere. He didn't say where, but I'm sure it's like a midrash or something. Baal Tzifon was one of the gods of Egypt. And therefore, Hashem said, stand right there in front of that God of Egypt, who was like the last remaining God that we didn't do anything to, I didn't do anything yet to. Stand right there. And when Mitzrayim's going to say, is, oh, my last God is going to do something to you guys. And Hashem says, you stand right there so that I can show the Mitzrayim who's really boss. I want Bnei Yisrael to stand there so that when I do something to them, even in front of that Baal Tzifon, Mitzrayim are going to be like, whoa. They're going to be blown away.
It couldn't be so obvious. Because when you're saying it, I'm like, can you imagine your father comes in and he's like, don't worry about it. I got an army, see those guns? I got all sorts of money in the bank. Not going to be a problem. You're not going to, it's not a, I don't know what I'm trying to say. It's clearly couldn't be as clear to them. To us, yes.
No, right.
Hindsight.
No, you're right. You're right. You're right. But it's just, I think the goal here is really to, the Zera Shimshon is trying to say to us, at least, he's trying to say is that the word Yad Ramah is only used twice, basically, in the Torah.
What word?
Yad
Ramah.
a lofty hand, a wondrous hand. And so it has to be, there's a reason for it here and in Parshat Peshalach, which is when they actually leave, that they use that word. So he's saying it was used specifically in those two times, it's used specifically these two times, so that Hashem was trying to show whose hand is really the loftiest hand of all. Meaning Hashem was trying to prove to everyone that his power is over everything.
Still has to be somehow not very obvious. I mean, we're living in the times. When I started learning here, one thing that struck me is that we're going in circles. Because what Zera Shimshon is talking about in Torah is what we're experiencing now here. You and I, everybody here, are like, wow, miracle. Avram Avinu could have been sitting on the stone where this house is built.
Right.
And whatever. But it's not so obvious because there are plenty of people that are like, yeah, whatever. Very nice. We'll send a child here for you.
Okay, and therefore?
I'm just saying that it's it reads to us like an obvious thing. Hashem came, strong hand, all those people died, blah, 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 and you have to be.
No, there had to be some
not so obvious to them.
Right, it had to be. No, that's the thing. The Mitzrayim really didn't believe that they believed that their gods, even though Hashem destroyed all their other gods, they believed that their God, in some way, was going to do something to kind of.
He'll retaliate with nuclear.
Right. So Hashem said no, and that's exactly the point. What he's saying here is exactly the point. Is why Hashem made them go around back to Baal Tzifon. When they left, he basically said is go up and back around. So the obvious question is to why. So Hashem says is the reason why he wanted, the Zera Shimshon is saying, why did he go back? Because he wanted to prove to the Baal Tzifon, which is the name of the God, which is the last remaining God after Hashem destroyed all the other gods, Hashem wanted to prove to him, even this guy, that you guys this is like your last, prayer, I'm going to take care of him too. And I want Bnei Yisrael to see in front of them, Mitzrayim, that even Mitzrayim, who has a lot of confidence and belief in that one, you, Bnei Yisrael, you're going to walk right through. Nothing to worry about.
And it had to be very serious, strong, whatever, the angels that they put in those in. Because as far as I remember, Moshe was like the only one who was able to actually get through and get out of Egypt. Because whatever the spiritual forces they were using in Egypt somehow enveloped the entire country and nobody could get out.
Okay. So then how did Bnei Yisrael get out?
And he was able to get out, which is...
Open the door for everyone else?
No, like whenever he ran away, initially.
Okay.
What? In other words, it's not as simple as it sounds when you read.
Yes, that's true. That is true. Now...
I don't know why am I interrupting you.
So
I know why.
now he takes it. There's a plot twist. So if we look, now it says Aval Yisrael kiblu alehem din shamayim b'simcha shemetu krovehem. So up until now we were talking about when Hashem punished the Mitzrim, and how the Mitzrim didn't realize the punishment and the gravity of the punishment until the next morning when they went to their house of worship and they see all the gods destroyed and they're sad about their firstborns. And now all of a sudden he switches direction, and he says Bnei Yisrael accepted their punishment as well happily. What punishment is that?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is something he says here. Shneimar l'chol bnei Yisrael haya or b'moshotam. In the time of the Makat Choshech, there was light in there. Right? It says in the Makat Choshech. It says. So he says that Bnei Israel had light in their moshvotam, meaning in their residence. What does it mean b'moshvotam, meaning in their house? It could have just said is they had a light, right? If we're trying to say, if the pasuk was trying to say is that Bnei Israel had light and the Mitzrayim had darkness, just say Bnei Israel had light, and we would have understood that they have light and they have darkness. But the fact that it says that they have light in their residence, there's got to be a reason for that. So the Zera Shimshon is picking up on something that's
They paid
they paid their bills, exactly. So it says here, V'yesh Momar sheba letaretz mashi kashal al diarush razal shebishloshit yemei hafila chapsu Yisrael bebeit hamitzrim ve'ech efshar shebishloshit yemei hafila yasu Yisrael chipus zev v'lalu kol ha'miyuvalim. So we know there's a famous midrash. What happens? Why was there darkness? And what does it mean that they had light? Is that when Bnei Israel in the darkness, Bnei Israel would go into the Mitzrayim's house, and they would see with their light that they had, they would see where they kept all their fancy jewelry, and that when later, when they left, they would say, "We don't have any jewelry." They'd be like, "What are you talking about? In this stone, in this stone, in this stone, in this stone." Yeah, I see your bank account exactly. And then the Zera Shimshon brings another interesting point: is that what happened to Bnei Israel during the time of darkness? Hashem had a little pity on us, and there were a lot of Jews that deserved to die. Right? During that time, 4/5 of Bnei Israel were destroyed.
Every time from Babylon, they also did.
Right. So 4/5 of the people in Makat Choshech, 4/5 of the Jews died in Makat Choshech. So the Zera Shimshon is saying is, I don't understand. From one side, you're saying they had light in their house, and they were supposed to be going around looking for the Mitzrayim's, secret, safes. But on the other side, they're supposed to be sad and sitting on the floor for the sadness of their all these 4/5 of the nation.
Of your classmates.
Exactly.
Gone.
Right. So
Jews, not just
right. Exactly. That's what he's saying. So how could they be walking around like searching for gold if they had 4/5 of the people dead or dying? Right. He says that there are 4/5 of the Jews. They shouldn't be looking around, looking at their houses and looking for gold. They should be sitting on the floor sad.
Percentage-wise, it's even worse than Shoah.
Yeah. Exactly. Ve'esh Lovim, the Ita b'Shulchan Aruch Yoredea. So he says that he brings another Shulchan Aruch. It's interesting that the two Torahs that we brought today are the ones from the Shulchan Aruch. But anyways, he says it's Kol ha'porshim midarchei tzibur porkim ol mitzvot me'at zavaram ve'ein nechalim b'chlal Yisrael ein onim alehem ve'ein mitalblim alehem. Now, this is a tough statement to accept nowadays. But in the time of the Shulchan Aruch, he said is that the people who basically denied and disregarded all that had to do with Judaism, we have no obligation. The Shulchan Aruch is saying this. I'm not saying this. I'm just quoting. We have no obligation to sit shiva for them. In fact, the opposite. If they died and they weren't observant or whatever that means, therefore, we should actually be doing this. We should be, in some ways, quote unquote, happy. That's what he says.
We shouldn't be surprised.
We shouldn't be surprised. But he says here, Lovesh levanim means wearing white clothing, which is a sign of happiness, and also smechim. He uses the word smechim. So he says here, so he says the Jews. The Jews that were dying. The Jews that were dying in the Makat Choshech, the ones who were still alive, were not upset because they knew that these people that were dying, the 4/5 that were dying, were people who didn't want to leave. They didn't want to be part of the Jewish nation. In other words, they deserve, quote unquote, they deserved what they were getting what they deserved. So therefore, Bnei
It's not
Yisrael,
what they deserve, but it's what they are. They
What do you
deserve
mean?
to die for that.
no,
But if they gone, like they gone.
no, but they accepted it. According to what he's saying here, look what it says. "Af elu shemetu tam mitatam hayam mipnei shelo hayu rotzim ol mitzvot la'klal b'chlal Yisrael." They didn't want to be part of Bnei Yisrael.
Can you imagine any one of us today saying, them Jews, whatever. They knew what's coming.
No, listen. Again, I don't know.
We're not gonna say that.
No,
We're gonna cry.
We're not going to be happy about it.
Especially if it's someone we
But,
know,
again-
chas v'chalila part of a family.
no, exactly.
Even if you can say, I talked to that guy a million times, wouldn't listen to me, forget about it. What?
So I
now he's
So I said specifically, it's a very powerful statement what he's quoting from the Shulchan Aruch, and I don't know how we
I'm
can.
not arguing with him. I just want to understand.
I don't understand it either because to me that's a power. I mean, listen, to say that you don't have to be sad is one thing. To say you don't have to be, you're not obligated to be sad is one thing. But to say that you have to wear white clothing, which is like a sign of happiness and purity, and to say the word sameach and ochlim, to eat and drink and to be sameach, that's already like one.
Next level.
Next level, right. So now I don't think anyone today would say that that's the case anymore. But again, right, but that's why I said specifically before I started the statement saying this probably doesn't apply to me today
This was a
anymore.
hindsight.
Yeah, it's a more of a, right, he's using it more of a proof of saying is that the people who died, not to say that they deserve to die. It's not that they deserve to die, but rather that the punishment, Hashem, in some ways you can look at it the other way. You could say Hashem showed pity on these people to not make them die, not allow them to die in the middle of the day, but rather do it at night, so that way it was a little bit less obvious, but at the same time, the people who did survive, they felt that they could sense the, they didn't want to be included. The people who died didn't want to be included, and therefore the people who did survive were saying is, thank God we survived. Thank God Hashem says, you know what? I don't want to say, God forbid, that they deserve to die, because that was very hard to say. It's a very tough statement to say. Right?
Maybe they're showing happiness that Hashem did it in a discreet manner.
So interestingly, he says something very similar to that at the end here. He writes, discreet manner, they accepted the fact they may have been disappointed or sad,
Right.
but they still would have said is, at least they were, they died peacefully, if you will. Right? They didn't, it wasn't like some big thing. They just did it in the middle of the night, quietly. We know this was coming, kind of thing, whatever. Now, again, I'm not saying, I don't understand this whole thing, but it's just an interesting thing. And therefore, he says, look what he says here.
If you would understand it, I would be standing, not standing.
Right. So he says here, "Lefichach krovem lo hitavlu alehem, ela adrava samchu me'od ki be'od v'ibud v'sha'im rina, u'v'yamim kadmunim hayu osim moshavot v'amdot v'chazartam min hakever." So it says here, and this is what he says. He says is, therefore their relatives didn't mourn for these people. Rather, the opposite. He says that rather that they were in some ways happy. He uses a simcha. I don't know. Again, the word simcha is a powerful word to me. I'm not sure what it means here, but he says in the olden days, he kind of brings another example. He says in the olden days, when you would come back on your way back from the cemetery, you would do what's called moshavot, ma'amadot. They would sit down for a few minutes, then get up and sit down again, get up, sit up, and again. Right? They wouldn't sit down. For these people, Bnei Israel, at that time, they wouldn't sit down out of sadness. And that's why it says, B'chol Bnei Israel hayu or b'moshvotam, meaning they had light when they were sitting. It wasn't that they were sitting out of sadness, but rather they were sitting out of light and of acceptance. Now, I don't know what the arch wrote. I would be interested to see what the arch would say. When they had to do that, this ceremony of sitting and standing out of mourning, rather they had light and happiness out of it, because I think the idea is that they accepted the fact of what Hashem did and what steps Hashem took to, even during the time that they quote unquote deserved the punishment, at least they did it in a way. He did it in a way that's compassionate and somewhat respectful, as opposed to doing it in some big way that the Mitzrayim would also kind of make fun of them for it. That's the other piece of Torah that I had. What does he say there?
Okay.
What is
The
the other?
extra word in the verse alludes to the explanation. Now, in previous times, they would make sitting and standing tributes upon the return of grace from the graveside. By the way, I went to that. What do you call those people that work with the
Pottery?
pottery? Right,
Yeah.
pottery. Right? It's very different from what we do.
Really?
And the fact that I saw an indentation on a stone for the head
Where was this? Where'd you go?
freaked me out.
Where'd you go?
By the Yarachika.
Oh, okay.
There's a pottery cemetery.
Oh, wait, what's that?
Ir David.
Honest, huh?
Ir David. Chafirot Ir
Oh, the
David.
Chafirot, okay.
Because this cemetery is one thing. Seeing a stone with the thing that's made for a body and there's a head
Right.
part, that's a little freaky.
Okay.
Unbelievable. Anyway,
What does he say?
upon the return from gravesides, the verse therefore says that during the Makkah of darkness, the Jewish people did not make sitting tributes, mashvut, in mourning for their brothers. Rather, for all the children of Israel, there was light in their sitting tributes. The term moshvotom, their dwellings, moshvotam, can also be translated as their sitting tributes. The verse would then be understood to be saying that the Jewish people had light in place of what could have been sitting. That is, when they could have made sitting tributes for their dead relatives, there was light and happiness instead.
So what's the summary?
They did
here?
not mourn
Right.
their dead because the ones who died were evildoers.
Okay, so he
This
goes.
was how they were able to search for Egyptian houses. Okay, so they realized that these guys were evil, whatever.
But it still doesn't.
Sinners and-
It still doesn't answer the question of to be very. The word sameach sounds very strong to me.
Unless it's absolutely obvious to you, and you're seeing beyond the.
No, again, like maybe
Yeah.
maybe my sensitivity is reading it as trying to understand something beyond. Maybe it was that they were just so evil that they were like, well, they're so evil, they deserve it, quote unquote.
No, but there had to be an absolute clearness,
Right, clarity.
Because otherwise, I mean, do we ever respond like that? Oh, that soldier,
Right.
that guy, please. Chas v'sholom, nobody will have,
פורשים דרכי ציבור.
Right.
What is דרכי ציבור?
What?
Today דרכי ציבור is something completely different from what it was 2, 3, 5, 9 years ago. Today דרכי ציבור, all of Israel is ציבור. Except everybody in Israel is a ציבור. Whether he keeps all the Taryag mitzvot or 10 mitzvot or 1 mitzvah, everyone is a tzibur. When you define tzibur, who always like, who is exactly as you, yeah, so everybody is out. You have to mourn about it.
We're probably living in such dark times.
Yeah.